Welcome back to Highlander Heart, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. This is really exciting. I kind of feel like people don't want to talk about this.
Okay, we'll do it.
But we have to. We're completists here. We've talked about the first Highlander movie a couple of times. We've done Highlander 2, Highlander 3, Highlander 4. We would be remiss if we didn't dive in to the source. So this is what we're doing. We're going to do this, and first of all, this episode we're going to be looking at the script, where it all began, and figuring out where it all went wrong. And it's been a fascinating journey, certainly for me, speaking for myself this week, in just really sort of seeing. Going back over the scripts, had a huge amount of help from some people in getting some of these drafts. Kareem Michael Damashki managed to get us some early drafts, which is fantastic. Thanks, Kareem. Really appreciate that. Had a lot of help online uncovering a draft I didn't even remember existing from Jill Burdigas. Put me on to Dylan James Matheson, who had a script that he bought on eBay, which was written by the guys who wrote the Saw franchise, but we'll get to that in a bit. So thank you to everybody who's helped us so far in kind of uncovering this, and obviously to Peter Briggs as well, who sent me his 2 drafts that we'll be talking about also. So we need to do this. We're not going to do it Highlander style, jumping backwards and forwards, because that would be far too confusing.
In what world?
Exactly, yeah. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we'll find that.
Yeah.
So we're going to start at the beginning. And Rob, we have the first thing we had basically is half a script.
Yes.
I don't know why it's half a script, but we have half a script, which is the earliest draft, which was written in September 2002. So what was that about?
Well, before we get started on that,
Wow.
okay, I can tell you exactly why it was only half a script. Because it was titled Highlander.
Right.
But there was one glaring omission. There was no Highlander.
Right.
Nothing. Nobody. Not Connor, not Duncan, Quentin, Colin. I would have taken Owen, any of the MacLeods.
Yeah.
There was not one single Highlander in this Highlander half script. And yeah, I was like, when's anything going to happen? When's Duncan going to turn up or whatever? Nope. 50 something pages, nothing.
No.
So that's basically what I remember from this script. But basically the script is somebody's trying to break into a rich Japanese businessman's collection of art because it's going to be destroyed, searching for an urn. And basically there's more than one person looking for this thing. And yeah, hijinks ensue. Somebody tries to get the urn because it's a secret to finding the source. And then they go on a weird adventure in the jungle with a couple of flashbacks to try and explain how some of these characters got or met. And then, yeah, not a lot else happens. Turn up in this jungle. It feels like it's like there was a lot. I mean, there was pages doubled. The file that I got, a couple of pages were doubled. One of them was missing. It was a bit confusing.
Sure.
But yeah, I was reading about these characters. One was like Alondra, Dax. Yep. There was a Jason that turned up near the end of the script, who's making a Highlander video game. And you're just thinking, I don't give 2 Fs about any of this. I like, look, okay, we're on a journey. We're looking for an arm. It will lead us to the source. It will take us on a little journey, and you're fine. It's like the Indiana Jones thing. You're going on your wee thing through the jungle, and I don't care about any of it.
No.
I'm just reading it, and it's just dire.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just like there's nothing in it. A couple of flashbacks and a quicken or two, and it's just there's no Duncan, there's no Highlander, nothing.
No.
So I'm like, where's the Highlander? Where's the Highlander in the Highlander movie?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the half script.
Right.
Yeah, TV.
No, and it's interesting, and I know Joel will tell us in a second that some of that continued on in the further drafts. So next, Joe, you're going to talk about the next two drafts that were. So we don't know that first half script was written, who that was written by. I don't think. But we know that the next two drafts were Joel Swanson. So who also wrote Highlander Endgame. So his two drafts are November and December 2002. So Joe, I'll let you catch us up on that.
And I'll say at the beginning, from the sound of it, that half script or partial script does sound like it's probably from Joel, only because it sounds like not only an early version of the script, but everything that Rob just talked about is carried over into this new one. Plus the one from November, even though it's the first one credited to Joel, has a section at the beginning that says changes in bold, which means it's obviously changed from something else, whether it's his own first draft or written by somebody else. We may never know. But anyway, the November 2002 script, I will say, I'll be controversial here and say, if they had shot that script, that would have been a phenomenal movie. Not just a Highlander movie, but a movie in general. It was, it's one of, I would say it's one of the best scripts, period, I've ever read, because it balances action. It has romance in there. It has, a science fiction element, but more than that, it has characters that we care about. Again, there is a ton of new characters. The only continuing character from Highlander, the series of the film franchise, is Duncan MacLeod, who, again, in this one shows up much later in the script, or I think it's like page 40 something before he shows up.
Mm-hmm.
But the characters that we get at the beginning, they're well fleshed out. They have their own characteristics, their own voice, which poses a problem for the next draft, but we'll get to that. They have their own voice. They, at the point at which the characters, no spoilers, but the characters exit the story, you actually, you know enough about them and you've been far enough with them that you actually feel it. And the whole kind of subversion in a way of what they are building up the source to be, and kind of turning that on its ear at the end with a couple really interesting bits, I thought did well. And so it sort of answers the question, but leaves it vague enough that you don't feel like, you sat through 3 movies of the Clone Wars that were boring as hell. So, and it feels like a full, complete story. I don't know if, I know later they said that the source was intended to be the beginning of a trilogy, and I don't know if that was the intention 5 years before we got the movie. But it feels like a self-contained movie. To me, even though there's a lot of new characters in it and very little from the previous movies, it still feels like, it feels fresh, but also feels sort of like the ghost of the first movie, and not in a bad way. It just has that kind of spirit about it. But like I said, it's just a fantastic script. It starts off much like what we saw in the version of the source, with people over the internet, mortals over the internet discussing a lead to the source. I was kind of surprised by how much of this, through all the drafts that we got after, ended up in the final version, but in a terrible way in the final version.
Yeah.
You know, we have a character being chased to a radio tower that gets, you know, killed by the stranger, as he's called in this, instead of the guardian, although he is a guardian. But you know, it does that, and then it's a group of immortals that don't necessarily trust each other or like each other, but they each have a bit of knowledge that will get them to the end, and they set off in this epic adventure together. And along the way, they find a very grizzled and downtrodden former MacLeod clansman, being Duncan. Of course, there's no mention in the script of anything that happened to anybody from the series, Mythos or Amanda or Joe. There is a section, though, with the main character, who's kind of the focus character. Her name is Highlander. And there's a section in the script that feels like it wasn't changed from a previous draft that actually refers to her as Amanda. So I don't know if at some point the intention was that it would be Amanda as the main character and kind of a follow through, which actually I think would have worked really good. If we get to our pitches, you'll understand why I think that. But you know, they encounter Duncan. You know, there's betrayals, there's flashbacks, and you know, they kind of, one of the cool things I thought in the script is they build up this mystery to the source by every time there's a quickening in the movie, it flashes to what is described as these huge brawn-headed statue things that turn, and you come to find out at the towards the end, when they get to the source of the source, it's actually these little wind chimes that we've been looking at the whole time. So that's what I mean by they kind of turn things on their head. You think, oh, it's going to have something to do with some ancient, you know, beings or something like that, and it's like, no, that's just wind chimes. It's not really relevant to what we've been going through. And then they kind of play on this whole, you know, Adam and Eve kind of thing, with the stranger being Adam, Alondra, our main character, being Eve, and those two being responsible essentially for pretty literally birthing immortals throughout time. And you know, it still has a bit where Duncan fights, I'll call him the Guardian at this point. Duncan fights the Guardian, and he realizes through a series of reveals that if he defeats the Guardian, he will become the Guardian and be possessed by whatever spirit it is that's been driving the Guardian all this time. And then it just kind of ends. There is an interesting character you mentioned in the partial draft called Jason. And it's a character described as an American that kind of shows up a couple places early in the script. And then when he's revealed at the end, he's a mortal who has a syndrome that causes him to prematurely age. And that's why he's kind of become embroiled in the search for the source, thinking this might be, you know, the cure to this rare disease he has that no one's been able to cure. And so he ends up tagging along. And he provides kind of the really cool out for Duncan killing the Guardian. He has the mortal do it. And, you know, they establish early in the script that if, you know, somebody, you know, a mortal or somebody that's not immortal, somehow, you know, an immortal loses their head, the quickening doesn't go to anyone. So that kind of sidesteps the whole worry about an immortal being possessed by the Guardian at that point.
Yeah.
And yes, he does have a Game Boy on which he designed a Highlander video game. I kind of thought that was a good humorous and kind of maybe a meta poke at all the times folks have tried to do Highlander video games and failed.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I kind of like that. And I really liked his character, even though he was in it for a short period of time.
Yeah, in the half draft I read, he was literally just introduced in the page before or something. Then he became, it felt wrong. But yeah, I mean, there was that in the half draft. As soon as I started the half draft, I sent you guys the thing. Scotland big open spaces, Scotland, this, woo, whoosh, whoosh, Scotland. And then Glenmorangie, there can be only one. And I was like, I'm out, I'm done. I'll read this later. And I was like, no, I'm done.
But as far as single malt, there can be only one, and that's Glenmorangie. So
Well, yeah. I mean, hello. I'm not averse to a Glenmorangie or 6. I'm just averse to really cheesy ads and taglines like
Product placement, yeah.
It's like this product placement. I'm okay with that. Go for it, product placement. But the tagline, there can be only one. Oh, no. Anyway,
But
sorry.
no, you're right, Joe. It was. I mean, both of you have, mentioned the fact that Duncan doesn't really show up, and it's a really odd thing, and I'm not sure where that came from. Whether it was a decision earlier on that maybe Adrian didn't want to be have a main role in this movie.
Well, I remember Adrian. Sorry, slip of the tongue. Adrian wasn't sure if he was going to sign up. They were starting writing these scripts before Adrian wanted to sign on.
Right.
So they had to plan without him for
Fine.
not being in it. And
Sure.
then they sort of slipped Adrian into a script.
Yeah.
That didn't tailor it to a Highlander. That's where they went wrong, I think.
Well, yeah,
it's actually interesting you mentioned that, because in the very next draft from Joel from December, and he notes at the very beginning that this is a rewrite because the producers demanded that essentially Duncan have more screen time and be the focus and the star. So I imagine after he wrote this draft, the first draft in November, probably sometime early December is probably when Adrian was like, yeah, I'm on board totally. And they were like, yeah, you got to rewrite this to have more Duncan. Here's the thing though, once they do that, the way the script's written, to me, it doesn't work. Because essentially there's like this whole thing at the beginning with Duncan hiring some scientists to actually study him and try to determine the source within him of immortality. Like at what point does he revive? What causes the immortals to revive and things like that? But there's not really much else done with that. So I wasn't quite sure why that was thrown in, if only to give Duncan an early scene. But it seems like they could have done,
that scene that you're talking about there was in the unnamed draft that I read.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a different character, Katja, who has no belly button.
Yes.
Has been born somehow without a belly button, was not born actually. And it turns out she, like you're talking about the Adam and Eve thing, and she's getting experimented on to find out how she works.
Right.
And one of the drafts, I think it was one of the Briggs ones, she's killed, revived, and MRI scans sort of trying to figure out how it happens and stuff like that. But
I guess
I never read the Adrian the Duncan stuff though in that.
Yeah, that's in here written for Duncan. It doesn't feel right. And honestly, it was kind of jarring, not even just because I read the previous draft, but in the second one, he literally changes the character of Dax out and gives all of Dax's lines to Duncan.
Search and replace, basically.
Dax is kind of this wise ass, kind of carefree kind of character, and trying to hear those lines from Duncan MacLeod, especially one that's gone through everything we've seen him go through, really was weird reading that. I'm like, okay, that doesn't work at all. And it just seemed, this one, because they were adding more Duncan in it, they took away, to me, from the characters, the new characters. So honestly, they were just they ended up just being these cardboard two-dimensional characters that, unlike the previous one, when they exited the story, you were just like, okay, what's the next step? It was almost like a, paint by numbers at that point. So really, to me, oddly enough, lost a lot by adding more Duncan in there. I liked the fact that in the first one, he was just kind of this guy that showed up later, and he does, provide an excellent solution and resolution to the story. He's there at key a key moment to rescue the characters essentially. So he does have definitely his heroic moments. So I was kind of okay with just a bit of them, especially if this was being viewed as kind of like maybe a reboot or a way to continue the story with the characters that, or yes, character that survived in the draft. It kind of made sense that he would only be really around for like a handing off of the baton moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the second one just really falls short to me. It's just like, oh, well, to me, that's where things started to go awry.
Yeah. But at least the good thing is that right up front in that script, Joel's like, I don't think this is the way to go.
Yeah.
He says that, and we totally agree with him there. I think, yeah, it makes sense. The other big problem with that is that at the end of his original draft, it turned out that the Guardian was inside Dax.
Right.
Throughout a large portion of the film, and it was a reveal that actually, he's actually the Guardian is now inside him. But of course, doing the search and replace from Dax to Duncan meant that now at the end of the movie, Duncan is actually the bad guy, effectively. And there's no way anybody would have had that. Like, no, much less Adrian Paul. I'm certain.
Well, I think
I would have enjoyed that. It would have been something new and different, and it would have been. I never saw that coming.
Yeah.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Joel kind of acknowledges that by he doesn't even write an end to the second one. He just has a section where he's like, there will be a resolution. Someone's got to fight Duncan. We've got to destroy this, but not before we redeem Duncan. And then the character of Jason dies or doesn't. I mean, it was just like, all right, fine. You figure it out if you want it to go this way. I mean, it seems like he's very dissatisfied with having to rewrite it. And like I said, I agree with him because I think whatever draft that was from November is just an amazing script. I'd like to get an answer to this, but when Duncan is introduced in the script, he's described, he's all grizzled and disheveled. He's drinking, whiskey by the bottle, and he's smoking. And somebody in handwriting wrote on the side of the script, "Heroes don't smoke."
Yeah.
I'd love to know if that is a producer or what.
It can't have been Bill because he used to smoke cigars like they were going.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So maybe it was Peter Davis. I don't know, but
I don't know.
Very interesting to know who wrote that.
Absolutely. And there is one that I would almost call it an elephant in the room, but it's not. It's a monkey.
Yeah.
That we haven't discussed yet. And that's Conor the Monkey.
Yes. I thought that was great. It was a nice touch. He had a pet monkey, and obviously at this point, if we're following Endgame, Connor's gone, and so he probably either despite the memory of Connor or to celebrate it, he names his monkey Connor. It was great.
Okay,
was awesome.
hang on a minute.
And Connor actually got a happy ending in this script, unlike his namesake. So
how dare you stand in front of Ellendon Castle and say such things?
Well, so now I would have had problems if he called if the monkey was called McLeod, because that would be besmirching the entire clan. But to have a little cheeky reference to a beloved clansman, probably, I would say even if Connor were still alive, he probably would have done it anyway, just to, take the piss out of Connor. So I thought it was
no.
So
I'm sorry.
Now
Having a pet monkey, I'm fine with that. But hang on, the scripts. I kind of read them backwards because I went from Briggs to the half draft, so I'm going in the wrong direction. But when you're talking about a film that spans a lot of countries, adventures, rope bridges that fall apart and stuff, and you introduce a pet monkey, I'm sorry, you're ripping off Indiana Jones beyond belief at that point.
Well, sure.
Well, I think that was definitely the case. I think there was definitely a feeling of wanting to, because the whole thing is a kind of a archaeological heist movie. It's in a sense. So that it has that feel of romancing the stone,
Yeah.
Indiana Jones, and all that kind of thing.
That's why, I mean, in the scripts with the heist, and it was a mistake of putting Amanda's name in it, you kind of wanted it to be Amanda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You wanted it to be Amanda. This is something I'm looking for, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing a heist. I've been asked to do this, blah, blah, blah. It goes to Duncan. Duncan's like, what's this? We can figure it out. And it takes him on an adventure. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And there's definitely, that side of things, I think, got a little better as things went on. All right, so then we get to February 2003, and we have another draft. Only we don't know who wrote this draft because there's no name on it. So, you know, there was talk, I know, of David Abramowitz being involved at some point, doing a polish or a draft, whatever, but obviously we can't say for sure where this one came from. Rob, do you want to talk us through where this one goes?
Well, this one, I mean, the half draft kind of looks like it came from this, or the half draft was included in this one. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about characters that we've never met, never heard of, being introduced. And there's a building and a high rise, kind of like there was in the movie, and there's villains, the stranger guy looking for immortals and stuff, and there's a journey, there's some information, people chit-chatting online with different handles and stuff like that, about this source, about this urn of Sapura, the one that will lead them to the whatever. And basically you get about halfway through the script before Duncan's introduced. And you kind of know he's in the draft because one of the handles on the internet chats is Culloden, so it's like not exactly subtle. So there's also a woman who's got no navel belly button, and an MRI, wanting a doctor to try and figure out how she works, all this kind of thing, who gets caught up in this other story of finding the urn and all this kind of thing, and ends up on a journey into deepest, darkest Africa, basically just trying to survive while the strangers try to kill them. They're trying to get to the source and whatever. In between times, there's big stone heads that are a machine. Every time a quickening happens, one of them turns, and it's like, yeah, okay, what's going on? Basically, you get all these characters, and Duncan's introduced them like very late on. It just turns up when they're all in prison together. It's like, do you want to help us all go find this source? And I'm like, okay, fine. But yeah, I don't think any of them are that good. But yeah, they go on this journey, and that's where the thing, when Joe's talking about the Adam and Eve thing, this is where I saw that for the first time. It was in the unknown draft. The stranger turns out to be Kay Sadar. His name's Kay Sadar. He doesn't talk funny, he's not strange, he's not that. He's just got a name, and he's equivalents himself to being the Adam, the first immortal. Katja, being the woman with no navel, would be his Eve, and they're the progenitors of all the immortals, and some blue light and stuff, and pools of whatever. And there's a fight which Duncan, the idea is like, what if one of these people don't become or part of the source, or don't, and Duncan goes, then there'll be only one. And you're just like, and then he chops off the bad guy's head, nothing happens, everyone goes back to, all the things stop moving, and they added in an alignment of stars that happen. The source isn't a place, it's it's something that happens at a time and starts again, and you're just like,
planetary wobble, basically.
Yeah, everything's a wobble, mostly my brain. It's just one of those that's just like, this, you took me on this journey and you ended it here.
Mm.
Kind of like, no. I mean, at that point, it didn't feel like there was going to be a second one, like the idea of the trilogy.
Yeah, yeah.
First part of a trilogy. It's like dead end. Everything's done.
Yeah.
Good guy, woman, romantically walk off into the sunset kind of thing. Done.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like there's another film coming up.
No.
So
I
that's
think it came in a little bit later. I think the trilogy idea, we'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, so what happened after that is that the script. I mean, I say this. There may have been other writers that were involved in between. What we're just talking about, what we have access to, what we've seen, what we've read. So the next kind of step along the way, as far as we're aware, is Peter Briggs' draft. And this came around in July 2003 was his first draft. Now, an interesting story for me, anyway, is that the source is kind of special to me in a way because it's how I became friends with Peter Briggs, and we met very much like the movies or the scripts. They all have a through line of these kind of people on computers talking to each other, immortals all over the world, talking about the source, using these handles so that, you know, protecting your identity and things like that. And weirdly, in a kind of like a life imitating art thing, that's exactly what Peter was doing, talking to people on the Highlander boards back in 2003. Yes. So I was on there as well, and he was talking, you know, kind of basically like, what do you guys want? What do you want out of a sequel? What should it be? But nobody knew who he was. So he would just have these conversations and whatever. And I think I did this, I mean, looking back at it now, awful poster thing for Highlander the Source to kind of go, hey, you know, that would be cool if your version was made and it looked like this, whatever. And he dug it, and then I kind of did a bit of digging. My kind of like journo kind of investigative bit like kicked in, and I figured out who he was. And so I you know, like PM'd him, and it's just like, oh, do you want to meet up for a drink? So we just met up for a drink, and we've been friends ever since. So it was an interesting way, but I love the fact that he was kind of in there amongst us all, kind of asking, you know, what is it that you want out of this script? You know, what is it that you kind of want to see? And I think some of that, the answer of some of that is evident in his draft. So we've already talked about the fact that that there is an initial heist at the beginning, which has rebounded through various characters having been involved. In some drafts, literally almost all of the characters are involved in trying to get this urn, this Superior, that the inside of which has basically the wherewithal to help you find the source. It's a little bit honed down. So now, the first ever draft was Ellie. I'm going to say it wrong. What the female character's name was? Highlander or something like that.
Highlander was in the half draft, but and it was Katya in the full draft.
Yeah, exactly. So Highlander then became Katya. Katya now becomes Ursha, but it's the same character effectively. So so she is involved with trying to get this thing, but also now we have two other people vying to get the Superior, being Mythos and Kate from Highlander Endgame. So already we're kind of like...
Is that the second draft? I read the first.
I think it was in the first draft. I don't know. I'm not sure, but effectively, you know, so she has roped Mythos in to basically pull an Ethan Hunt and go full on black garb, high tech monocle to kind of, you know, scope the place out and go and find this Superior. So he manages to get in there and manages to find the thing. As he's leaving, we get our first proper glimpse of the Stranger, which is still a continuation from the previous versions. Although in all the previous versions, for the most part, the Stranger is one person. It's not, although we understand the idea of him being able, of the Stranger being able to slip from one person to the other in a kind of John Carpenter's A Thing kind of way through the quickenings.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's one person. So we glimpse the Stranger, and she this time is this sort of Asian character who is lying in wait for Mythos with, I think I'm right, a rocket launcher. And subtle, but Peter Briggs loves his action, so this makes total sense. So there's a big fight, and I should also mention that we've got some amazing, lovely kind of storyboards that I'll lay over these as I'm talking through it, illustrated by an amazing illustrator called John Kelly. So they have a fight. Mythos' sword is shattered, as is, you know, it has to happen in Highlander movies apparently. But he manages to get away with his life, and the two of them get off with the urn, and the Stranger is left, you know, kind of, you know, sort of bummed out, obviously, that she didn't get to kill him or whatever.
He pouted,
So,
you know.
but the interesting thing about and again, this was picked up in previous drafts, the Stranger, it has lots of scars, which are kind of symbols, almost like Maori style symbols on their face, which is also kind of found on the Superior and leads, and, you know, sort of part of the whole sort of source thing. So then, almost straight off the bat, we cut to the Forge from Highlander. Conor's Forge, which is now Duncan's Forge, and is now this sort of, it has a satellite dish on it. I mean, that's basically what he's written in the script. It's rebuilt, you know, from being destroyed. It's rebuilt, but again, this is attest to the fact that, you know, Peter was really trying to kind of just recreate those links to, you know, previous, you know, the franchise as a whole, really. So we get Duncan literally waltzing around in a kilt and nothing else, because, you know, why not? And he gets on a call with Kate, who's trying to tell him about, you know, what's going on, and she keeps dipping in and out, and she's kind of like, you know, glitching and whatever, and he doesn't quite find out what's going on. Meanwhile, when that all cuts out, she basically, the Stranger appears in her apartment, and they have a tete-a-tete, and they fight, but Kate wins. So, you know, great, end of the movie, right? You know, the Stranger has been destroyed. No, because the Stranger is now Kate. So now Kate is, you know, the one in hot pursuit, which is something that continues all the way through, which is probably my most favorite aspect of this script and both of his drafts. So basically, then we kind of rocket forward to everyone showing up in Khartoum, which kind of is, again, is something that's happened through all of the drafts. All of the Immortals got together. You know, it becomes very much the old guard, in a feel of all these, as you said, Joe, you know, all these kind of like mismatched Immortals who don't really get on, but they're getting on for the sake of you know, looking for this thing, and they all want to do it. And I think it's in this draft, but I could be wrong, could be in previous ones, where once they'd remembered all of the important information, they each smash up their piece of the Superior, so that they can, so that they have value. You can't kill me because I know my bit.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. I mean, that might still be
Mole.
Yeah. So having everybody else re-team up here, Duncan turns up, gets off a plane, and Joe's there to meet him. So they chat, and Joe's like, you know, I'll take you off to go and see the guy who's kind of, you know, really, you know, got us into all of this mess. And of course, he takes him to the bar, and there's Mythos. So then Mythos and Duncan have a catch up, and they sort of talk about the sort of ceasefire that's kind of happening with immortality as they're all looking for the source. And other, they've also generally have been doing this, looking for other relics and things as well. I think in his script he mentions Methuselah's stone and a few other things. So kind of adding more to the kind of that aspect of the not supernatural, but the little in a slightly more fantasy kind of tone aspects of all of this. And in explaining all of this, there's this lovely little moment which might or might not have worked, because obviously it was going to be very clear that you couldn't have done it in any other way than actually is written. But there is a scene with Mythos and Ramirez, which is, just like from a fanboy perspective, I'm like, this is great. And again, you pulled in from the original and you kind of gone, look, these guys have been around for a long time. Of course they were buddies. But within the script, obviously, Mythos comes in, Ramirez has his back to the camera, and you never turns around. You just see that he's there and you see that they were together. But I still like it. I still like the idea that he's connecting those two dots, which is cool. So then after that, they go and basically look for weapons to go on this journey. This again is a holdover from previous drafts. There was always a weapons dealer, but again, Briggs doing what he's done the whole way through so far. The weapons dealer is now Matunus from the first movie. The guy ended up on the end of Blade, and he's now found himself in Khartoum selling weapons.
Yeah, he landed on his feet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, he literally did.
I'm sorry, but after his experience in the first film, I think it would have put him off going anywhere near weapons.
Or at least
well,
weapons.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But again, it's a nice little moment. And, there's a quip about, I saw these two crazy guys going at it once in New York, but it's one of those things that you could watch it. You're going to hire somebody. It doesn't matter who you hire to play this role. Sure, hire him. Why not? The fans will love it, and it's not a problem if people don't get it. It's a really nice kind of little kind of tweak. So Duncan is reunited with Kate, which is great. But then there's sort of this discussion about how this could all go hideously wrong. It's all sort of discussed as kind of almost like Immortals Ragnarok, sort of, or the Immortals extinction. Or if it all goes wrong. And another aspect of this, which is nice, so the Jason character that has been in there from, again, from all of those very early drafts, and this remains the same, that he has Werner's syndrome as well, that he's aging very fast and that kind of thing. But he turns up a lot sooner in this, and he is, which seemed like a crazy thing for them to miss in the first place, he's a Watcher. And in fact, the Watchers are in this, not a lot, but they are represented as being a proper organization. There's this great storyboard of them walking through the Watcher building, and much like the FBI or the CIA, the emblem is on the floor with it, Latin around it and that kind of thing. So you've got this really nice kind of cemented idea of the Watchers actually being like a full-on operation at this point. Really.
And following in the grand tradition of secret organizations loving to advertise themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But the logo, if I remember, the logo was stars instead of circles around.
Yeah. Which just kind of
they mentioned it was a fascist logo.
Well, to be fair, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So in this version, Jason is a Watcher. So but he got into it for the reason that we all know from the previous drafts, that he's aging, and he's fascinated by immortals. He's always wanted to look cool with a sword. He always wanted to kind of do what they do. And in this draft, he saves the day in his Citroen 2CV, which again is illustrated beautifully in one of the storyboards of them with Kate Stranger on top with the sword, basically trying to kill them. So from that point, the teams follow the ley lines, which is another aspect towards the source. They're kind of following this. All the while, there are flashbacks with Duncan and James Bruce, which I think is a historical figure. I presume he is. People probably give me a slap for not realizing that. Sorry, and they it actually because these flashbacks happen earlier on, and you never quite. It's okay. It's a flashback with Duncan. Okay, nice. And you never really understand what's going on. But at the point where they then discover Ursha in a cave, basically entombed, then you understand the connection with these flashbacks and why it's important that they found her. So they talk about. So you sort of see the fact that Ursha doesn't really know where she comes from. She doesn't really have a lot of memories, just flashes, and doesn't really understand her heritage, or which kind of alludes to kind of basically what we've already discovered in the previous drafts, that she's very much connected to the source and the beginning of the source, although this takes it a little bit on a slightly different journey. So they also then come across ancient watchers who kind of talk about the source, and they kind of give a little bit more background into it. Again, a no-brainer for me to include them in this. If you're going to have, not an organization, but if you're going to have a people who understand immortality and the source, why not be the instigators of the Watcher organization? Yeah. It kind of seems to make perfect sense to me. So they also discovered the people that drank the waters of the source and rubbed them on their bodies, and it all went horribly wrong. Some of which we kind of see in the actual movie with that weird, crazy kind of
elder,
yeah. I think that's kind of effectively where that kind of came from. They take the final push for the source, and they get there, and there's nothing there. The source is dry, effectively. The water's gone, and it's just like the source is gone, and then it's just like no, Ursha, you're the source. And it turns out that Ursha is the source, effectively, which is a logic. I won't say it's a flawed logic. It is another way of kind of dealing with the source. I like the fact that it's a misdirection, which we talked about a little bit before. You're expecting it to be the Holy Grail. You're expecting it to be water in a cup, but there it is, embodied in this woman who is effectively has it within her to restart immortality, or to let it sort of end. But of course, all the while, you've got all the immortals that are going on this journey are getting picked off one by one, and this stranger is becoming each of them one at a time, and burning the symbols into their face, or cutting them into the face. And so you're never necessarily quite sure whether the people are with them, are they the stranger now? Are they the original, are they supposed to be, so there's a big final battle, as there always is in each of the drafts. And as we've said before, Jason decapitates the stranger, and then dies. But he says, the quips, well, at least I've got to be cool with the sword. That's kind of, great. Okay. And then Mac and Ursha go and get ice cream. Yeah. Look, I mean, okay, fair enough. She says, well, I'm only human, and that's kind of how it ends. I'm not going to say that's the best ending in the world, but I think, it was kind of it was a way to end it, I suppose. It kind of came, the story in itself came to an end. We discovered what the source was, and that was that. So following that, the script was then given, and this is something that I'd either forgotten or didn't know at all, was then given to Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunson, who are the guys behind the Saw movies. And unfortunately, I haven't read that script. The guy that has it, Dylan, he hasn't had the chance to kind of get it up online. I think he's going to hopefully be doing that at some point soon. So we'll actually hopefully get to read this thing. But his very short synopsis, it's quite different. although there are elements of it in there. So basically, he says Duncan's girlfriend is kidnapped, and Joe and Mythos show up to tell Duncan that he has to fight the guy who took her. And then he's put in a contest against 20 immortals near the source, which is a pool of every spirit of the immortals. And his girlfriend gets pregnant and has an immortal baby. And then it jumps ahead 25 years. And Joe and Mythos wonder what happened to the child. Turns out he was raised by an evil immortal and now hates Duncan. And that's how the movie ends. So we were talking earlier about this idea of them being of it being in trilogy, and I kind of feel like this is where it was born. I know from what Pete said that his drafts were deemed to be too. They had asked him specifically make them epic, and so he had made these big car chases, these big sort of set pieces. Just kind of a little bit edge above what Joel had done in his drafts. But obviously the problem was then, no, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
So you ask for one thing and then you say, well, no, it's no good. So for whatever reason, then they've decided to, I guess, go in a different direction. But again, it has to be said that it's important to understand that at this point, Dimension still had the rights to Highlander, and were probably still very heavily involved in the direction. So it may well have been that there was more money available for Highlander, the source, at this point. So, it may have been that, that these things were on a slightly larger scale. But I know through talking to Dylan about what he'd said, that that their script was before Dimension then lost the rights to Highlander. The time, the option time was up, and it reverted back to the original producers. So there you go. So basically, script-wise, we only have up to that point. We've only ever read up to that point, and all we have is what John Mosby said in his book, Fearful Symmetry. Always good to give that a little bit of a plug. That. There it is. It's literally like it never leaves your side. We know that because John was there on the set of the movie. He'd spoken to Brett and had a little bit of insight into that. So we know that that at some point, that when it went back to the producers, that the script bounced backwards and forwards a little bit. Brett was involved in some ways. David Bramowitz apparently was involved in some ways, and effectively, we wound up with what we wound up with the final shooting script. But there are elements. I find this fascinating. Having read through all these scripts in the last couple of weeks, I do find this fascinating because it is a really interesting look at script progression and the way that this works. And I know some of us have been involved in script writing and things like that. You see it from the very beginning towards the end how things can completely change. And I really found it quite interesting to see. You can see the characters that stayed all the way through. There was, I think, the blonde guy who's in the source, Giovanni. Yeah. He turns up he's in Peter's draft. I think he's in Joel Swasson's draft as well.
Yeah,
in the second draft.
The unnamed one as well.
Yeah. So he was there all the way through, possibly the only character aside from Duncan who is. Through whatever reason, I guess, Ursha and all her previous versions of her name became his girlfriend in the source, who I can't really remember the name of because she's not really that interesting. Oh, bless her.
Not that
But
memorable.
yeah, but she became that character and had some role in the source at the end, and yet it meant really nothing because I
Yeah.
don't really understand. She was a human. She was just a human who, you know, I don't know, somehow she was involved, but maybe she was there at the very beginning, but that was lost in translation. And there were some characters like Reggie. Maybe Reggie was Dax in a way, in this kind of like cheeky, kind of like young.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point, he went from being somebody who was quite old and experienced as an immortal to being a guy who'd like died a couple of years ago bungee jumping.
Yeah.
And this,
Yeah, that was in the second of Joel's scripts. Yeah, he'd only been around for 3 years, and it describes his bungee jumping accident, which is pretty great. But,
yeah.
That was in the unnamed one as well.
Yeah.
Like the sports guy who thinks he tried to beat Evil Knievel's jump record or something, and he's just like, hang on, if you're immortal and you're extreme sports, where's the extreme part?
Yeah, I know. It's yeah. So, but it's been interesting to see basically how it kind of progressed. I wouldn't necessarily always call it a progression, but how it changed all the way through.
Well, there's also the desiccated ancient whatever it is that they talk to.
Yeah.
In the desert, that's all the way back to Joel's drafts as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, that's true. And the Guardian in all of its forms, we still ended up with the symbols. There was the suggestion, I think, that there was a supernatural speed in one of the drafts. I think that there was something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, for my money, I love the idea of it. It was very. I mean, it was there from the beginning. This idea that it could traverse through quickenings and jump from body to body, but it wasn't massively used. I love the fact that Pete used it in his draft so much that it literally you weren't ever 100% sure, who along the journey, whether they were the Guardian or not. Was a cool little kind of twist, I think. Yeah. So, I don't know. I say we ended up with what we ended up with. Right. So let's go through. So for those who aren't familiar, this little section we like to do every now and then is we like to look at what we're talking about, and we'll talk about maybe pitch what we would have done if it were offered to us. So in this circumstance, we're going to be looking at if the producers came to you and said, we need a movie based on the source of immortality, because every time we've tried to look at that, it's gone really well. So we want you to do that again, only this time no aliens, but we want a movie based on immortals looking for the source. 3-minute pitch, go. So that's basically what we're going to be doing. As always, if you go over 3 minutes, or make it 3 minutes, because every time I do 5, you guys always just beast it. I'm the only one left prattling on for more than 5. I got caught by the Guardian last time, and the Guardian will get you if you get over 3 minutes.
How do you know I'm not already the Guardian?
Nah. I should. I'll sit here and I'm just going to start drawing on my face with a biro as you're talking.
That works.
Right. Okay. So, first up is Rob. Go.
Okay. Hang on.
15 seconds already.
The best 15 seconds of this pitch was that. Basically, I'm thinking along the lines of the trilogy idea. I like it. But all the things that we got in the source and scripts and stuff like that, all to a bigger story, a more grandiose story. An idea that nobody knows none of the mortals know what's going on, who they are, why they are. Not even Mythos, the oldest living immortal, that kind of thing. My idea is that Mythos has come across this information that is interesting. It predates anything they know about a new language, a new something that happens that he needs to investigate. And he needs something. So he goes to Amanda, I need this thing to help me on my understand this. She goes, takes something, brings it back to them. They all want, says this could be to find out what your origins are. And the first thing they're going to do is go back to Duncan and go, this is something we don't know. I want to, come with us. We'll do this thing and we'll go on this journey. Along the way, they'll meet Joe, because they need some information, they need travel, stuff like that. Eventually, they all go on a journey. And this is basically the first movie, and they get to wherever it is on the map of the device or something, and they're captured by a load of people, dragged into this hidden city that nobody knows anything about. And they're basically captured. And they're dragged before some guy sitting on a throne. It's like, what are you doing here? What's this? What is this? How dare you speak to Lord Cortan that way?
Mic drop.
And that's the movie ended. It's like, pardonnez-moi?
Nice.
Wow.
So the city ends up becoming Moganda, and you find that out in the next one, and then
nice. Like it. Well done. And you managed to avoid the Guardian, as always. Well done. Good job. I really like that. That I was not expecting that. All right, Joe, you are next up. Off you go.
So you throw out everything. Conor the Monkey is the star, and he is the source. No, I'm just kidding. All right, I'm eating up my time. Sorry. I would take Joel's second draft from November, and I would say this is the baseline for your story, but you're going to change the character of Alondra with Amanda, and you're going to change the character of Dax with Mythos.
Yeah.
And also, Jason, you're going to replace with Joe, but he's not on a quest to... Joe isn't along to get immortality or to find the source. He's there because my pals are going, I'm with them, and I'm going to be with them the whole way. So basically the movie unfolds just like in that script, except when we get to the end, of course, we find out that Mythos is possessed by the stranger. And the reason for that being, there's actual reason behind it. The stranger has learned very early on that the best way to survive the longest is to possess an extremely long-lived immortal, because they're more powerful. So he was in possession of Darius for a while, and that's why Darius was in Paris. And so when Darius was killed, the stranger escaped because he was killed by a mortal, and he found the next oldest mortal he could find, which was Mythos. And that explains why Mythos, Adam Pearson, ends up in Paris as well, because that tends to be where Amanda likes to hang out. So that kind of ties back to the series and all that. So the end of it is, kind of like what happens in the draft. He throws the sword to Joe and he's like, Immortal's got to kill him. And Joe's like, but that's not going to matter because he can still possess someone. So, Mythos is still alive. Duncan basically taunts the stranger into possessing him. And so the climactic battle is in Duncan's head, where he and the stranger are fighting. He beheads the stranger, but then the stranger laughs, puts his head back on and says, you defeated me, now I get to possess you and I get to own you, and you're not strong enough to fight me. And then you hear a voice say, you don't have to be strong enough, brother, we're here with you. Conor walks up in Duncan's mind. You hear another voice going, of course you're not alone, and Richie's there. And every good immortal that Duncan has had to kill over the years is there, and they're like, we'll help you keep him at bay. So basically that's what happens. Duncan is the stranger, but because of the good quickenings and as pure as he is, he's able to keep him at bay mentally. He's kind of like, I can hear him there, but and so Amanda's like, well, where does that leave us? Are we Adam and Eve? And Duncan's like, we're going to live our lives. We're all the same as we ever been. We're pals and all that. And they go up, Amanda, Mythos, and Joe walk off into the sunset.
Wow. Amazing. 4 seconds to spare, by the way. That's
Nice.
superb.
Excellent. So, yes.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love it. Oh, man. Right, okay, cool. Yeah, see, mine's just going to be rubbish now. Okay. So there's an episode where Duncan talks about this white walled city, and I don't remember which episode it is. And I can, in my mind, I can see Andy Sloan shouting it into his computer screen, telling me which episode it is. And in fact, I'm sure loads of people are, but anyway, I can't remember which one it is. But it's always interested me that that's the one and only time, I think it was the first season, that they ever discussed any idea of there being somewhere where immortals lived together in harmony. So if you look at the old texts and things like that, Shambhala is kind of the spiritual home of immortals. That's where immortals come from in our kind of real world. So I always thought it would be a nice idea to include that as maybe where they come from. So there could be, this quest to go and find out. For this is the sort of thing that Mythos could do for shits and giggles, because he's got nothing better to do. He's bored. Oh, let's just go and find the source. People are talking about, let's go and do it.
He's got a few decades to kill,
Yeah, exactly. Why not? So off they go on this quest to go and find the source. And when they do, they find this sort of old kind of white-walled city that Duncan had mentioned before, where immortals had lived, but is now decimated. It's sort of been destroyed. It's in ruin. But they find one chamber which is still intact in it. They sort of open these, and then there's one sort of guardian, but not the guardian. But there's this sort of person there who's protecting it, and but he's immortal, but he's on his last legs. He's literally crumbling away, and he says, go, but at your own peril. What you find there, be prepared to find what you find. And they go in, and it's this huge area with tons and tons of little well springs, and there's all these little well springs, and they're all over the place. And like, what is this? This is the source of immortality. This is where it all comes from. And I love that idea that in original drafts they were, it really is that these well springs were coming up from the center of the earth, and they were part of. So immortals are very grounded and very to the earth, which I think is why Peter renamed her Ursha, because it just felt like earthy kind of like connection. So they, like, what do we do now? And so I guess one of them, probably Mythos, then steps into one of these well springs and goes underneath and disappears and doesn't come back out again. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? So then somebody else tries it, and they go through. And to cut a long story short, basically what it is,
Pick up the pace or die, Highlander!
Coming to get you.
We'll never know now.
Ah.
Script.
All right, okay.
Behind you.
Conor the Monkey will get you. He will scream.
You know
at you.
what? It should be Conor the Monkey. I feel bad using Christian Solomino because he's doing amazing things at the moment. He's such an amazing filmmaker. So Christian, not that you'll ever watch this, but I apologize for taking this out of you. It's not your fault. So I'll say, basically, in a nutshell, what happens is when you go through these pools, each pool leads to an alternate universe. And so each pool you go through, you go to a different world where things were different. And so through these pools, they can then visit the world of Highlander 1, where Conor is now, sort of the one. They, and sort of has grown old and whatever.
And they can go to Zeist.
No. And
Yes, they can go to Zeist.
They can't go to
That's
Zeist.
a different dimension. It's
With
just
that's where
planted
Conor
in
the
a different
Monkey's from.
dimension.
Yes.
Conor the Monkey's from Zeist. He's like Gleek on Super Friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to do a Super Friends thing with all of them stood there and Conor the Monkey.
Yes.
I don't have time, but I'll probably have to do it. And basically, the dramatic twists and turns and things like that, it turns out that there is one person hopping from reality to reality, offing all of the immortals in each world, becoming the one in every single reality. And then our reality, the one that we're in at the moment, is the final one. And it's mythos. It's not our mythos, it's a mythos. And it's the final showdown is then between Mythos and Duncan, which I kind of think people always kind of wanted to see.
I saw that movie with Jet Li.
Yeah. All right. Now look, I had this idea before then, right? And I was pitching this to Kerry years and years and years ago, and I had her like she was really invested in it until it got to that bit, and she went, "Oh, what about just Jet Li's the one?" I'm like, I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. What is it about? And that was
You haven't seen it?
At that time, I hadn't seen it.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. He literally does a quickening.
Yeah.
Every time he absorbs someone, he goes, ugh. Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of the concept there. So I'm reusing my old material, to be fair.
Hey, I just thought mine up today.
Yeah, I can't do that. Yours, both of yours were massively better than mine.
I kind of want to write my script now. I mean, I've got.
I kind of want us three to write the script.
Yeah.
Zoom brainstorming meetings and come up with the best sequel.
All right. Well, there you go. We've looked at the scripts, and our next episode we're going to be looking at the movie, in all its glory. But until
when you say looking at the movie, do we need to watch it again?
Nah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
I mean, I've only watched it 75 times. It'll be fine.
Okay. So in lieu of another guest, and I'm not going to do this again, let's play like Russian roulette with people. Rob, do you want to see us out on this show?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I can remember what to say. I had 2 drinks. Okay. Thank you for watching Highlander Heart. Hold fast and don't lose your head.
No, Conor the Monkey is awesome. I want an animated series about Conor the Monkey now because he's just awesome.
Okay, now you're talking. I'm in. Yeah. Conor the Monkey with a sword.
See, it writes itself. He's basically going around and he does like accidentally saves people and stuff like that with a sword because he doesn't know what he's doing with it.
Yeah, or he eats a date and accidentally dies.
Right. Yep. But it comes back because he's an immortal monkey.
Oh my God!
Yes.
A monkey quickening. Woo!
Yeah.
Amazing.
See, it writes itself. I'm just saying.
That's our pitch done.
Easy.
Yeah, that's my pitch. It would have been focused on Conor the Monkey, right?